three subjects come up, but there's one subject that comes up almost every time, and it's education. It doesn't matter if it's a parent, it's a teacher, a grandparent, or just somebody who's concerned about Bermuda's community. Education is the key to the success of Bermuda's future. And for that reason, it's most important that we make sure that the changes that are being made in education and the plan for education is in the best interest of all of our students. We have seen issues in education for several years. But what I'm going to say is it's been 30 plus years. Politics in education has caused issues for multiple generations. I'm going to take people back to where education was in Bermuda when it was world class, and we had multiple schools throughout our country that were providing the kind of education that produced doctors and lawyers, carpenters, plumbers, masons, the people that built this country. Successful people in our community right now that were produced by our local education system for free. You could choose to go to private school, but the public education system was competing student for student with private education and international education. The reason I bring that up is because there was an issue way back that was about the 11+ exam and the pressure that was being put on young people that caused a change to happen in education. Political change based off of we're solving this particular issue. They solved it by completely revamping the entire system. I point out that the system that was working, instead of us focusing on the young people that maybe needed another path to a different school later on in life because that exam was too much pressure for them when they were a 12-year-old, the whole system was changed. And here we are today where we have heard it generation after generation that the public school system is falling behind. And now we have schools that are closing. We have parents that are upset. We have teachers that are upset. But it's our community that loses. Because if we don't fix public education and start to compete the way we used to compete, this cycle will continue. So the number one priority of a One Bermuda Alliance government will be to take politics out of education. Now, although the points that I'll make is that we want to return to world-class education, we want to focus on early childhood education. We want to make sure that the assessments that are done for our babies into young children into school means that they also have the support that is needed for them if there are any issues that are identified. That early stage is when that intervention can change the trajectory of that young person's life. The present government came in and said that they would get rid of middle schools. They gave a big headline, and they were able to come in and say, we're going to take out middle schools. But remember, you go back to what I said happened originally, somebody thought it was a great idea to bring middle schools in. We are hearing today that one of the problems that is being identified by teachers and parents is that our young people are now having to make a choice at that early stage of life to choose what direction they're going to go in school that could impact them for their future. So 30 years have passed, and the same problem is still there. That is because politicians have gotten in the way of what really should be put in the hands of the experts. So an independent education authority without the political interference, because the political cycle is 1 to 5 years, but a young person's education starts at birth and can go all the way into your 40s because you're still being educated. So it shouldn't be on the cycle of whether I think that something exciting and flashing and new is being put forward, because that is not in the best interest of our children. And remember, we are building them towards the future that all of us want to see. So with that, first thing that we would do is pause this reform. You have to. And then you have to do a full audit of what has happened up till now, where we are, what's working, what's not working, and then move forward from that point under an independent education authority and not politics. Yes, I understand that we have a low birth rate. I understand that we've had schools that have low classroom sizes. But I question, why is it that if those students are getting extra attention because the classroom is small, why are we seeing better results? Why is it that we are seeing more and more of our students fall behind? Why is it that we are seeing so much frustration from our teachers? When somebody signs up to be a teacher and goes through that study, it's because they want to give back to the next generation. When a teacher withholds education, that is their last resort. That is because they have reached a breaking point. They're not taking that lightly. The parents are frustrated with what is being done in education that is impacting their young people. Understand, we as a community went through COVID and the impact that it has had on all of us as adults. But think about what that impact has had on the children. And now, on top of what has been interruptions within their education journey, we've added school closures. We've added sick outs, lack of substitute teachers. And don't forget that they hear the same thing that's being talked about in our community, that public education is not doing well. Can you imagine what that does to the mindset of a young person who's in those schools? And every time we close another school, and every time this interruption happens, more and more of our young people are being pushed to private education. Over 50% now are educated privately. Think about the impact that is having on our community. More of our parents are having to dig even deeper to pay for an education for their child because they cannot risk what is going to happen to their child as they're getting educated. This is not an experiment. The children's future is too important for us to continue to look at this as an experiment. Maybe it's going to work. So parents are making that decision. And then there's parents that can't afford it. And many of those are being driven off island because they're saying, if I can find a place to move to where there is a good school close by, then I'm going to move to a different place to make sure that my child's future is bright. All of these things tell me that we have to pause what we're doing, make sure that every bit of it has been checked, analyzed, and at the end, the only result that I as a politician would want is that every child in Bermuda has access to a world-class education. Thank
you. Hello, Jasmine Patterson from Reed Broadcasting. Thank you, Mr. Smith. So, as you mentioned, education is a very deeply entrenched issue that's going on for generation to generation. Putting a pause to education reform, school closures, What do you say to those who might feel this is an even greater disruption than the actual transitional period that's been happening?
So the question is this: if you hear what has been said over the last 7 years, definitely 5 years, multiple times, the teachers have asked for the minister to step down. They've asked for changes within the department, within the ministry. Parents are complaining. The parent-teacher associations are complaining. I want to make sure everybody understands this first and foremost. We have to thank our teachers for what they have been doing through all of this interruption, because this process has been difficult for them. But if we don't pause, that means we are not listening. I said earlier, if the teachers are saying that they're going to withhold education by not being at school because they're not having the level of support, they do not believe that the curriculum is doing what needs to be done, it's time for us to be listening to them. So if some of the changes have been made and those changes are happening, shouldn't we make sure that those changes are working at the highest level that they possibly can, that they're going to achieve the end goal before we continue down a path? 10 years from now, if we continue down this path, then we find out that the problem happened, then we have to go back. That's a child that started at 5 and is now 15 years old that has gone through a process that somebody's then going to say was broken. I'm telling you that a politician did that 30 plus years ago, and we as a community are dealing with the impact of it. Those changes that were put forth then, there were reports that said they would lead to gang activity. Lo and behold, that's where we stand today. So what I'm saying is, let's stop allowing politicians to march down on a journey without making sure that we are doing the best that we can do for our young people. The educators are there because they want to make sure that our children have the best opportunity. For that reason, we have to pause.
The PLP and their election platforms pledged that they would, withdraw any sort of overseas consultants that have been helping with education reform. It's unclear whether that is due to their job being complete or whether it's just not working. I just wondered if you had any views on that and reading that platform.
Well, it's just interesting that we've been all the way to New Zealand to find help for Bermuda. And then we've had the minister traveling to Japan to talk about what's happening in Bermuda. But we can't actually say whether the progress in our education system is working or not working. Don't you think that the community should be the first to know whether this system, this reform system, is actually progressing us towards the goal that all of us want? Obviously, millions of dollars have gone to a consultant. It would be very important for us to have a copy of a report that would have said the analysis of what happened up until this point. And this is the reason why I'm saying we pause it and then you do a full audit. We need to know what has happened up until this point that led to where we are today, so we can determine the success going forward.
Just yesterday, Sad Secondary Middle School, I believe their teachers had a sick out. A few weeks before that, there weren't enough substitute teachers at Whitney Institute. In terms of staffing levels, are you hearing anything about the amount of teachers that are available to supply the current school system?
Once again, these are issues that we should have a really strong hold on. We've had several schools close. So why is it that we don't have enough teachers? The math doesn't seem to work. But what I'm hearing more and more is that we are starting to increase the amount of people that are in the admin side of education, which is also increasing the cost of education. We have to make sure that we're in the business of educating children, not having more and more people sitting in an office.
Thank you for your comments. So you're talking about pausing the education reform process. Some of these schools have already transitioned into the new system. Are you proposing that we pause and continue with 2 different systems, or are you looking to reverse the work that's been done so far?
So the first thing I'll say is it wouldn't be up to me. It would be up to the independent education authority. That
Time.
has to be the priority though. So the issue is you have to get in and understand what the changes are, what has happened to this point and what impact they had. We know that signatures were put forward and then after the case, they were looking for people to actually give them the information for that signature. That tells me that this hasn't been planned out properly. We've had schools that have closed for children to move to another facility, and the facility hasn't been set up properly yet. So the idea that we can continue to play that game with children's lives, I would rather pause and figure out where we are than continue to make mistake after mistake.
Sure. So you're saying pause. So that means we are going to have two separate systems in place under an OBA government when you get into.
Well, presently we have two systems, right? Like this is the thing, as the
It is.
transition is going on, there's two systems.
Mhm.
So we wouldn't be changing anything until we know what is working, what's not working. And if that means that we have to reverse the part that's been done and move in a different direction, then that has to happen. But once again, it won't be the politician making the decision. It has to be the people in the system. We have to empower our schools. We have to empower our teachers. We have to make sure that there's autonomy so that they have the teachers that are going to do what is best for our students. That has to be where we're going. People always talk about the comparison between public and private. I'm going to tell you this. Private knows that if they're not getting the results from those students, they're going to have to make changes. We have to hold everybody accountable in the system to ensure that our students are getting a world-class education.
Okay, so a priority, say you do win the election, would be to establish an independent education authority. That would be the number one step.
Yes.
In terms of your education policy. How is that going to be funded? We've heard the minister say that any kind of authority that they create can't be independent because it's going to be partially funded by the government. So they have to be held accountable by the government. Would you take a different approach? And if so, how is it going to be funded?
Well, the first step is obviously the minister's been spending millions of dollars on a consultant from New Zealand. So that starting point, I believe that if there is going to be cost associated with it, part of that is going to be if we're having an education authority that is doing specific things for education, parts of the present setup of education will eventually have to be phased out. And that's where that cost change will happen. Because you can't keep the old system, put in a new system, and then leave the part behind that's actually costing too much money. Because anybody that looked at the budget last year would have seen that 2 schools closed and the cost of education went up. We have less students, but the cost of education continues to rise. So we have to implement as soon as we possibly can a system that is going to change. If in the early stage, it means it's going to be cost to put in an education authority, independent education authority, that is an investment that I think we should be prioritizing. As I said, it is top 3 in all of our community, and our children's future is non-negotiable.
Have you attempted to cost what an education authority would be?
We have not at this present time.
But it's your number one.
But it is. So part of it is we have to go in and see what is happening at present, because the present government has already said that they've started to look at this system of having an education authority. So that framework would be there. The difference would be for us, it has to be independent. And the reason we keep saying that specific word is we've seen what interference from politicians does to authorities by what has happened in the tourism authority.
No, you're going to have some pretty qualified people to head that. It's not just let's put a few people here and there.
I agree.
That's a big mandate
Most definitely.
for it.
Yes.
So who's gonna run it?
We'll find that out once we get to work on the 19th.
Okay. Timeline? Do you have a timeline? I mean, this, surely it's got to be quick limbo.
Well, the 2 systems have been going on for all this
But
time.
you don't want it to carry on.
And I don't, right? So
what's the timeline?
because it's a priority, I can't give you a timeline until we get in and actually start the process. But what we will tell you is this: there will be updates on a regular basis to make sure that all parent-teacher associations know what's happening, our community knows what happens, and the press will know so that you guys can give that information to our community. We have to open up the dialogue, and it cannot just be a simple WhatsApp chat that goes out, because the minister likes to hide behind those things. But the truth is, we have to make this a priority, and we have to communicate it in a way so that our children know that they are our number one goal for their future.
The innovation unit, are you hearing anything about the contracts haven't been renewed?
Haven't heard anything on what happened with that.
Again, for like
we don't-
now, this is
we
should be
don't-
happening now.
Should be happening right now. We don't know a lot about what has happened up until this point, and this once again goes back to my point of pause and audit. We have to know all of it, and it's not just the opposition or the government that needs to know, the community needs to know. If we don't change the way we are behaving as a country and create accountability and transparency, we will continue to be in the same position 5 years from now. And it is our position that transparency and accountability has to be out front.
Okay, final question. How is the OBA's relationship with the Committee Union of Teachers? Do you have a relationship? Do you
So-
think that that's a good relationship to build in terms of this?
So when I
process?
first became Shadow Minister of Education, I sat down with the Union of Teachers at the time. The issue that I will say to you is, I believe that we should do everything we can to support our teachers, support their development. And that will mean that the relationship with the union should be strong. Because if their goal and my goal matches, then there's no reason that there should be conflict.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's